Okay, so what I want to do in this video is introduce the first of the 4 factors of production that we're going to be covering, and the first one is land. Okay, now we've been talking about how much production is wealth because production produces goods and services that allows us to consume more. So the more that's produced, the more that we can consume. So forgive me, but we're just talking about land here now, and we've already said this, sorry, and I've literally reading off the thing here. We've already said that production is real wealth in the economy because the more we produce, the richer we are as we can consume more. But then the question becomes what produces goods and services, and the answer to that is the factors of production. Now, the first factor of production that we're going to be talking about is land, but before we even do that, let's actually get a definition of what we mean by factors of production. The factors of production are those resources which are used in the production of goods and services. And what I like to say is factors of production are the things that are used to make stuff, and the stuff that you and I consume, or even for businesses to allow them more capital to produce more goods and services in the future. The factors of production produce everything that is consumed or used to produce more goods in the future. So the 4 factors of production: we've got land, we've got labor, we've got capital, and we've got enterprise. Okay, and what we're saying here is this one, what we're looking at in this video, is land. So it's always a good idea to know what you're talking about before you talk about it. So what's the definition of land? So land is anything that is provided by nature. Okay, we didn't create it as mankind, but that is used in the production of goods and services. Every single definition of factors of production ends with used in the production of goods and services. So here's a bit of land, but just kind of getting back to this definition here for the visual learners, just saying land is anything provided by nature which is used in the production of goods and services. Okay, now the weird thing about land in economics comes from the definition, which is anything provided by nature. So if I said something like fields, yeah, absolutely. Now, the question that you have to be asking yourself through all of these, or each of these photos, is how could this be used to produce goods and services? Well, fields is obvious because you can grow wheat on it, or, you know, even if there's only grass, you can raise cattle. There's a million different things you can do, okay? You could pave over all that and build a parking lot, okay? So there's so much stuff that you could do with a field, absolutely. Forest, how could this be used to produce goods and services? Well, genuinely, you could gather like wild berries or nuts. You could cut down these trees and turn them into wood for lumber that you could use to make houses, all this kind of stuff. Rivers, well, there are different ways you could fish in rivers. Also, if you diverted a river, you could use it for hydroelectric power, and that's a service, I suppose, not really a good electricity, but anyway. Lakes, again, you can fish. Another thing that people don't think about, look at this beautiful scenic lake that we have here, and you know, like, that would be great for tourism. That's a service, so that's a production of goods and services. The sea is obvious because you can fish in it, you can transport goods and services, you can, what else can you do? You can run like different tourism activities on it, all that kind of stuff. Okay. Now, soil. Now, just to be clear, yes, the sea, even though it's water, it's not earth. That's land in economics because it's provided by nature and it's used in the production of goods and services. I would like to think the soil is relatively obvious because you can use the soil to grow crops and things like that. Now, the climate, again, not obvious, you know, but again, the climate is used to grow certain crops. So certain crops grow better in a tropical climate, like oranges or something like that, and other crops, potentially wheat, grow better in ones that have more a mixture of rain and sun, that kind of stuff. A stranger thing is animals. Okay, now I wouldn't. People do eat horse meat, actually, just to be clear on that one. But even in, like, and you know, they were traditionally used to like pull plows and stuff like that. But another one you can use is advertising. So Anheuser-Busch, the company, uses the Clydesdale horses as the symbol for Budweiser and stuff like that. So the idea is, again, what are they being used for? And that symbol there, or that picture there, could be used by a company even in advertising, okay? And then we've got fish. And again, I suppose fish are obvious simply because it's not land per se in the normal idea of you can touch the soil, but it is land in an economic term because these fish can be used for production of goods and services, i.e. selling fish in a supermarket or something like that. Now, we can subdivide land into the following categories, and there's a million different ways, but the two ways that I'm going to subdivide land are renewable resources and non-renewable resources. And as always, it is a good idea to understand what you're talking about before you talk about it. So what's the definition of renewable resources? Renewable resources are those resources which, if properly managed, their supply can be replenished. So supposedly there is an infinite amount, iffy way of putting it, but there is theoretically an infinite amount if the supplies are properly managed. So renewable resources are those resources which, if properly managed, can be replenished. That's the definition. So again, like water, if we don't overpollute it, we don't drop chemicals in it, no problem, it will renew itself and we can continue to drink fresh water. Forests, if we don't just chop it down like what we're doing in the rainforest, these can be renewed because trees will have seeds and more trees will grow. Fish, if we don't overfish, there will be theoretically enough fish, to take some amount from forever. From the sea. And soil, if we don't over-farm, we don't turn the soil into sand, and as such, crop rotation, stuff that happened in the Industrial Revolution, new ideas that occurred there, we can look after the soil and it will be able to provide us with goods and services, i.e. more crops in the future. And that's the kind of point. An increase in consumption of renewable resources should not be of great concern, as more of these resources can be made available in the future. Now, the second type of land, I suppose, are the non-renewable resources. And these are resources which the supply of which cannot be replenished. Okay? So that's what we're talking about. So oil, if you use a litre of oil, a gallon of oil, it's gone. There's only so much oil in the world, and the more we use today, the less that is available. So oil, coal, gas, and mineral wealth. Now, I mean, certainly minerals can be recycled and things like that, but still, if we use them up, if we use up a bit of tin or something like that, that means there's less available in the future if we don't recycle it, essentially. And any consumption of these goods now will mean less of them available in the future. However, the issue is with renewable resources that if we don't properly manage them, then they will become non-renewable. And just the idea of this kind of fish, overfishing can cause certain fish to become extinct. So the last blue tuna, and that's pretty much happening now, okay? And there's reasons why it's not owned. We'll talk more about that later. Now, the last thing I want to say about land is each monetary reward received by the different factors of production has a particular name. Now, the name that is given to the owner of land, and the name that is given to the monetary reward, to the owner of land, is called rent. Now, that's obvious. If I own, a house or something, I rent it out. But the house itself actually isn't land. The buildings and mortar is actually capital, believe it or not. So what I'm saying is, if I were a farmer and I rented out my land, I let somebody farm on it for a fee, the money that I would be given in economic terms is called rent. But also, let's say if we privatized the sea and I allowed a fisherman to try and catch fish on my plot of the sea, any fee that I charge, the money that I charge that fisherman, would also be called rent. So what we say is the economic name to the reward received by the owners of land is called rent. So each factor of production has a specific name we give to the money that they receive for literally renting out their uses, and the name that we give to the money of the owners of land receive is called rent.